What's going on, everyone? I'm Travis Brown with the Eagle, alongside Eagle sports editor Robert Cessna. I wouldn't say it's a big game. I wouldn't even say it's really a medium-sized game this weekend. A&M plays Mississippi State. It's not really for anything. Both teams don't have a shot at the SEC title game, don't have a shot at the upper echelon of postseason play. Cease, what is there to play for this weekend?
You know, it seems so hollow when we were out there talking to players on Monday, and I know Jimbo even said it after the loss to Ole Miss. They have to get bowl eligible. And, you know, it's been a while since A&M program was really worrying about bowl eligibility. That was just seemed like a given. Even under Sumlin, people could complain, go on to the Liberty Bowl, 8-5, Texas Bowl, can you win that game, whatever. But unfortunately, that's where A&M is. And I'm with you. I get no vibe for this game as a writer. And I think writers are no different than the fans. You look at the schedule, you know, hey, we're excited to go to Oxford. You know, it's going to be a good setting. We didn't even get to go to the Grove, and it was still a good game to watch. And you think driving home, Mississippi State, a really average Mississippi State. I won't call them bad because I've done enough research now. They can hold their own, and that's kind of like where A&M is, holding their own. But man, I just don't get a vibe like okay, they can be bowl eligible going into a nothing game, knowing LSU is ahead. I kind of sympathize with Fisher and the players because I think I also reflect the general populace that's not too excited right now. I mean, it's just there's not excitement.
This feels as much, next week is the ACU game, but in all intents and purposes, this feels like it could be the end of the year cupcake kind of game where who knows what this is the game that if you're season ticket holders, you might give it to your friends down the street who didn't get to go to a game this year. So all that said, there is a game to be played. There's still X's and O's on the field, and one of the biggest kind of question marks is we know that Max Johnson has gotten beat up, and there is a chance that he might not be available to play, even though Jimbo Fisher has said twice now that he is practicing. He expects him to be able to play. He was asked about his history with quarterback injuries, especially over the last 3 years, when you have Haynes King going out against Colorado, then Haynes King again, and Max Johnson, and now Connor Wegman. And he said, well, yeah, but if you look at all those injuries, barring Connor Wegman's, they happened outside the pocket. They happened while quarterbacks were rolling outside, trying to make plays. It doesn't have anything to do with the offensive line. But on the converse, you look, and according to Pro Football Focus, over the last 2 years, A&M has allowed the most quarterback hits of any team in the country. Do you buy that nothing needs to change on the offensive line to help protect the quarterbacks a little bit more?
I don't buy that things shouldn't happen. I will agree with Jimbo that they've been kind of fluky injuries. I go back to the Colorado game when we watch Haynes King go down and go like, nothing happened in that play. But I also believe there is that mental deal about this line is not a good line. So mental illnesses kind of wear on you. It's much like, I don't care what your business is. Here at the Eagle, it's sometimes if you make mistakes, then suddenly you become more conscious of it. And I always seem to make more mistakes when that happens. I can remember when we had a correction of a correction in the Eagle. You know, sometimes, and so while I'm buying that those are flukish injuries, why do they happen to A&M and they don't happen to other teams, so to speak? And I do believe if you're a quarterback at A&M in the last, ever since Mond, and Mond was a tough son of a gun. You know, I mean, a lot of people looking back, maybe he would have missed some games. But I'm thinking if you're a quarterback at A&M the last few years, I think you're carrying some mental baggage. And sometimes that can lead to a bad twist. That can be at the wrong place. And I'm a firm believer in a conspiracy guy and a karma theory. That offense line has to get better. Mm-hmm. And I think, if Wegman's watching the sidelines, he's probably saying sometimes when Johnson gets hits and he grimaces on the line and at the sidelines, he says, man, that could have been me.
Yeah, and I do think there's a compound effect. I mean, if you're getting hit 33 times in a season, like something's going to give, even if it's not, it went exactly, I don't know, play right in the middle of the pocket where it was an offensive line failure. Those things can compound. Hits can compound. I mean, talk about the declined value of the running back in the NFL and in the NFL draft just because hits compound. And I think that there is something to that when you look at where A&M's quarterback situation has been the last couple of years.
Well, because suddenly, whether it's your foot, whether it's your rib or whatever, and you get banged up a little bit, you play through injuries. I get it. But then you get banged in the same foot again or the same rib again, and suddenly it's even more tender. Or the next time you crack it or you break it because you're getting, and maybe there's nobody around you when you fall down and hit your ankle or your rib, but you've been hit in that so many times before that it only lasts so many times. And so it's not a good situation where A&M's in right now. Last week we saw the offensive line played pretty well, but Johnson still took some huge hits just as he left go of the ball. And you got to ask, I don't know who the quarterback's going to be for either team tomorrow on Saturday.
Right.
And so I think that's going to be a big part of the game because Mississippi State's definitely different if Will Rogers plays. And if A&M has to play Jaden Henderson, who I didn't even remember carrying the ball once against South Carolina or whatever, which he did, but man, it becomes a much different game no matter who the quarterback is.
You know, Chip Howard made a good point. I feel kind of gross, saying that on the air, but joking. Chip, we was talking to him yesterday of the fact that you have a Mississippi State team that had such a strong identity under Mike Leach of the air raid offense and the ability to whip the ball around. And even if they didn't win a lot of games, they put up a lot of points, and they have a quarterback who knows that system like the back of his hand. It's kind of surprising that they didn't try to keep that identity when there was this rapid turnover because of the death of Mike Leach.
Oh, I'm shocked because, I mean, you think about Mississippi State when they came in here last year and what Rogers did the last 2 years. I think in 3 years at A&M, he's basically passed for 900 yards, 7 touchdowns, no interceptions, and been sacked 3 times. I mean, you talk about a system to beat A&M. Mike Leach had it, and he had it at Texas Tech too. And I thought, oh, great, they're promoting their defensive coordinator. He's going to handle the defense. They'll get somebody else to run the same kind of offense they did, and they haven't. I mean, I think in 4 of his 5, either 4 of his 5 or 5 of Rogers' 6 starts, he threw less than 30 passes. That's just not making use of the people you have. And I don't want to rip the guy, but the numbers speak for themselves. They're 1-5, and they've got some decent defensive numbers. And I'm thinking, like, man, why didn't you stick with what worked on offense? And I'm perplexed, and I actually blame the powers that be at Mississippi State and the AD, because when they got Chris Arnett together and said, hey, look, you're not changing the offense. We're sticking with this. You can do anything you want to in offense. I mean, defense, if you're going to run the ball a little bit more, yes, but we're going to stay an air raid offense. So I was shocked at what happened.
You mentioned they do have some pieces on defense. Nathaniel Watson is first in the conference in sacks. He's right ahead of Edrin Cooper for A&M. You have Jet Johnson, who is first in the conference in total tackles. But all that said, they're still not a top 100 total defense. I don't. To me, looking at this game, it's going to be ugly in one of 2 ways. A&M blows them out, or A&M and Mississippi State get into a rock fight, and kind of like what that Arkansas Mississippi State was earlier in this year. I don't expect. To me, it goes one of 2 ways. Do you see it going either of those 2 ways?
I think it's going to be either or, because you would think the Auburn first half, how ugly it was out here. I think, if Max Johnson doesn't play or is severely handicapped, then I think this game could get real ugly. And let's not forget that last week Evan Stewart didn't play as well, and they had a couple cornerbacks playing. So you might want to keep some people even healthier this week when you got ACU next week, that you got a sure win to get that 6 bowl game. But yet you can't lose this game because they have 2 – is in a precarious situation. I think it all starts with Johnson. If Johnson is 80 to 85% and Rogers doesn't play, this is a blowout. But if Rogers plays I think he loves playing here. I think he plays well against the Aggies. He's had a few weeks off. I think they can be competitive. But then if Rogers plays and Johnson doesn't play, then I think you could be into a rock fight, because then I think Mississippi State would get very conservative, knowing they have the edge at quarterback, want to keep him upright. So it's been a while since I had a game when we're working on our pregame stuff. It's hard to say what's going to happen because both teams rely so much on their quarterback, and both quarterbacks, to me, are questionable.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about what this game is to play for, but what does this game mean moving forward? I mean, I think A&M is supposed to win. I know A&M is supposed to win it, and if you win the game, it's like, well, you won the game that you're supposed to win. But if somehow they don't manage to win this game, then you're looking at, you're probably going to get bowl eligible with ACU, but then it's just a seven win season if you happen to have a chance to beat LSU. Otherwise, you're right at 6 wins. What happens if they don't win this game?
Well, just more negativity under Jimbo Fisher and the regime right now. A lot of people around town and around the nation, if you're an Aggie, not very happy right now. This isn't what they signed on for. And Jimbo's trying to paint a good picture. I mean, his kids are still playing hard, what have you. They could have won last week. We've seen several times they could have had, quote, the season-changing or the program-changing victory, but they haven't had it. And now the losses would keep. If you lose to Mississippi State, a 19.5-point favor, when I look, early to this morning, it'll be the most they've been favored this year, because I think South Carolina went to 18 or 18.5 at kickoff, and they didn't play well in that game, not as well as they should have, considering where South Carolina was. So once again, is talking about style points, but people do pay attention to that. So A&M's playing at home. So if they don't win by 3 touchdowns, now if they jump out to a 4 or 5 touchdown lead and call off the Dogs, and Mississippi State came back and let's say got within 18, 17 and a half at the end of the game, okay, that's fine. They took care of business. But they haven't taken care of business in so long. When you see what they do in the second halves, they had a bad start against Ole Miss. That game almost was 21-0. There's just a lot of pressure on this program outside. And Jimbo knows it's there. You can tell by how he answers. Now, maybe the players are a little bit more of a vacuum out at the Bright Complex, but a loss would be devastating. I'm going to equate it to, it's like lynch mobs back in the old days in the West. Everybody's saying, hey, let's stay cool. Let's see what happens. But suddenly, if this team doesn't go 8-5 or 7-6 and went 6-7 or something like that, then I think Chicken Little would say, hey, I think the sky is falling, what we can need to do. So that I don't think Jimbo Fisher has a lot of wiggle room when it comes to popularity and the way people feel about him right now. He can't continue to lose points because, Biden's in, for example, the whole way to 2024. Jimbo's got a contract, but there's no guarantee that they have to bring him back. If things really go poorly, I think people can find $80 million because everybody has a breaking point. And people are going to say, if Sessa doesn't shut up, I'm getting off this podcast and watch somebody else. But everything has a breaking point. And if you're Jimbo, you don't want to flirt with it. You want to come out and take care of business and say, hey, we won, we did this. You want to be Jimbo Fisher and the players feeling good about themselves on Saturday night. If they struggle or, God forbid, would lose, it wouldn't be a happy Aggie land this weekend.
To me, what I'm looking for in this game is A&M to put together 2 complete halves. And not 2 perfect halves, but 2 halves that it doesn't look like night and day different teams like it was against Miami, like it was at Ole Miss, where the second half was the best the offensive line, maybe the best the offense looked all season, but that first half looked like maybe one of the worst first halves of the season. I want to see them a consistency that carries over between the 2 halves, because if they do manage to blow out a win, and we're trying to sit back and say, well, what did we learn from this game? What do we take from this game? I think the thing that that will give me the thought that this thing could be on the up and up is if they play 2 consistent halves. What are some of the keys? What are you looking for in this game, besides if A&M can just win the ball game.
Oh, you hit on it, because A&M has these, what I call these lulls. I call them these 3-drive lulls, where they have a trio of 3 and outs in a row, or maybe one first down, and you sit there and you're scratching your head because you don't like the play calling. The line doesn't play well. A receiver will drop a pass or not do it, and then suddenly they score like 3 or 4 touchdowns like they did last week against Ole Miss, but they didn't do that at the first. Then we see at Auburn they did that. They come out, three drives, don't do anything. In the second half, then they open up with 2 back-to-back drives, look like a championship-type team. And you're right, it's too late in the season. You know who your linemen are. You know who your running backs are. So, and sometimes it can be play calling. So you're right. It's very important. You want to see like the 4 quarters be like 7-10, 10-7, or 10-6, 12, 13. You want to see some consistency, not 0-14. 14-0, and the game's still in line. Now, trust me, like I said, if they're up 42-7 and call the dogs off and have a 0 in the fourth quarter, but you're absolutely right. And that doesn't, to me, do anything individual. It's just a collective group, because we saw last week the offense shows up, the defense is out to lunch. They got a chance to win the game, and the defense, in the last 3 games, the defense was there, and the offense was out to lunch. Mm-hmm. So, guys, let's get some cohesiveness in special teams. How about a special teams where there's not a gaff? I mean, I just looked up, A&M leads the nation in kicks allowed. You know, they've allowed 5. You think of the blocked field goal, field goals and things like that. They've allowed the most blocked kicks. Not good when there's 130 teams and you're the worst. So you touched on, Travis, the consistency. We just haven't seen that, and they're not playing a great team. And I don't want to belittle Mississippi State, because I think they can be a thorn in your side. So I guess I'm saying is I don't want to see them be a thorn in A&M's side for 3 possessions in a row.
Sure thing. Let's go a little bit no huddle here, because there's some other things going around Aggie land as far as athletics go. We'll touch a quick. First, we have the soccer team tomorrow on Friday, first round of the NCAA tournament. They were an 8 seed. They're hosting Colorado. That was totally unexpected. I think there was some thought within the program and from those who know college soccer that there was a chance they might not even make the tournament, let alone all of a sudden be seeded and hosting a tournament. So they got some great benefit of the doubt with some of the strength of scheduling they had. So interesting to see how they progress. If they win, though, they'll go and play number 1 Florida State, who they already lost to this year. And that could be an interesting, tough second-round matchup, because that is a tough Florida State team. We've talked a little men's basketball. I'll get into that in a second. But first, just a quick tidbit on what's to come for women's basketball, as I believe they open up their season tonight at home at Reed Arena. Yeah. We're recording on Thursday.
A lot of changes. They brought in 4 transfers. I expect 2 of them to be in the top 5 or top 6. I'm bad about names. AC, they call her that name, a long name from Auburn. She was 2-time All-SEC. They brought in another player that was at USC, and Oregon also an All-Pac-12 player. So when you bring in 2 potential starters, along with Janaea Barker, who still remains probably one of the best talents A&M ever signs. It's only a sophomore, and she was hurt a lot last year. So I think you're going to see flip from a 9-20 team to a 20-9 team this year. I think you're going to see a team possibly have a chance to get to the Sweet 16 like the men's. So hoops are going to pick it up here real quick. Great crowd for the men on deal. Maybe the women won't get that kind of support, but I think eventually they could get better support just because they look prepared, ready to win. And so it's nice to have something to fall back on when the football season hasn't lived up to expectations. So I think Reed Arena could be a busy place the next few months.
Yeah, Joanie Taylor came in last year, not a lot to know about her as in regards to how this program will shape up. But having covered her for a season now, what is different from those who might have just followed the team through the Gary Blair era, and what has she brought to the program? How is it different, and how has it been different in a year in?
I think a lot of it's the same. She's a really good X's and O's coach. That's why she's able to beat Gary a couple times. You know, a lot of people didn't get the best of Gary, and she did that at Georgia a few times. Great. Everybody says they're a player's coach, but she has that ability to me to be their friend, but yet be a very strict disciplinarian, and they're going to do it her way. And I think finally she's got, last year they played 7 games with 7 players. I mean, that's all they had. They had 7 healthy players. So she's really good, great recruiter, because all you got to tell is we live in the time of portal, and you can go out and get 2 all-conference players to transfer into a 9-20 team. What do you think she's going to be able to do when she's 20-9, whether it's recruiting high schools or recruiting, college players? And I think what we're seeing is all guys get back to the top. Jamie Morris, I think we're going to see that in volleyball as well once he gets another year. Well, Joanie's had that year. So I think you can make plans for the NCAA tournament. Maybe A&M will even be good enough to host. I don't want to get too far ahead, but nothing beats having people who were successful and going out in the field. So they have 3, I know right off the bat, 3 players who will be just as good as anybody else in the SEC, and that includes South Carolina and, LSU. What they don't do, A&M doesn't know how to win, because they lost that even Gary's last year. They didn't win. They didn't know how to win last year. That takes some time. That might take a whole season. They might still lose some close games just because they don't know how.
Well, that translates right over into talk about the men's team, because it's a team that I think now knows how to win over the last 2 seasons. And the thing that sticks out to me is the fact that Buzz will talk about how after the Auburn loss 2 seasons ago is how they kind of went, this isn't working. We need to reassess how this is all shaped up, what our philosophy is. And when they took that time and did that, that's when they made that push towards the NIT. Last year, it was after the Myrtle Beach Invitational early in the season that they said, yeah, what we thought this isn't going to be. Let's shuffle some things up. Let's shuffle it around. And that's what put them on the run for the rest that got them in the NCAA tournament. It seems like they're going into this season with knowing their identity a lot earlier. I think last year when you look at the shuffle, what it came to be is the fact that they knew to make up for some offensive deficiencies that they were going to have to get to the free throw line, get fouled, and get points from the charity stripe. I think that there's some level of that's going to continue on to this team this year, and that they're going to if Wade Taylor has an off night from 3-point range, or they can't get those baskets driving to the paint, that they are still going to have to get those points from the free throw line. But they know that. They already know that now going into the season. And the guys who know how to win, the veterans, are going to help kind of carry that. But it's as challenging of a non-conference schedule as we've seen in Aggie Land for a really long time. They're leaving right now on Thursday to go on the road to Ohio State to play. And even Tyrese Radford said he's excited about the fact that they might actually have the opportunity to notch one of those precious quad 1 wins before they even get to conference play. They looking if you translate Ken Palm's rankings over to what could be the net rankings, those come out later. They have a chance for 4 quad 1 wins before they even hit conference play, and that would be huge towards top seeding. So I think it is, like you said, it's a team that does know how to win, and the expectations are going to be high for them this year.
Well, it goes back to this is a basketball community if you win.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is under Billy Kennedy or whatever, they didn't win consistently enough. They would have a roller coaster effect. But this community loves basketball if you win. And I think, Buzz is probably in his program ready to take that step. And as you mentioned, when you're playing Memphis, you're playing Houston. So that gets people's attention, even when some of those games aren't here. And suddenly, if you're beating those kind of people, and everybody likes that number beside them. So good times for basketball. Like I said, Reed Arena.
And for those who don't know how the net and the quadrant, yes, I think most fans would prefer to have the team around Reed Arena and see those games here, and you kind of get that home field advantage. But that home field advantage is calculated in to those formulas where a quad 1 win is only a quad 1 win at home if they're inside the top, 35 or something like that, and then neutral goes to 40, and then it's top 50, I believe, in quad if you're on the road. So you get more leeway if you're on the road, and that's probably a little bit why Buzz Williams built the schedule he did, is that if you do go on the road and you get those wins, if you lose on the road, you're not punished quite as much, and if you win on the road, you still get the benefits of that quad one win, and you're on the road. So there's a little bit of that probably built into it as well, but should be a fun one to watch.
Yeah, it's all about what can you win in March, and that's very important. Get a high seeding, get there, and I think both teams will be having watch parties this year, so we'll see what happens.
Sure thing. Well, that's about all the sports we can talk about this week. Be sure to check theeagle.com as we continue to cover all these things going around Aggie Land. Thanks so much for watching this on theeagle.com. And if you're listening on the My Aggie Nation podcast, up and along the break, we have a little look at that Mississippi State team from someone who knows.